Thank you very much indeed, Ruth, and thank you very much to CMI for joint hosting this with AIM. And I stand here as the chairman of the Executive Steering Committee of AIM, which is a joint industry academic body that aims to excellent programme of work, which is the responsibility and the credit of Robin Wensley and Andy Neely, who are the directors of AIM, who are in the audience. And we've also got our own AIM coalition here, Rick and Nick, rather than Dave and Nick. But Rick and Nick are going to really talk about their own research. But it gives me great pleasure to talk on the subject of delivering the promise of management practice. And really, from our point of view, from AIM, it should be delivery the promise of management research, management practice, and thereby closing the notorious knowing-doing gap, with which we're all familiar. We're all familiar of the knowing-doing gap in our personal life. I must get fit, I will buy the swimming costume, I know I can swim, down to actually getting into the swimming pool. There is always, or often, a gap between the knowledge of what one should do and the doing of it. I see this in my own research in medicine, in clinical medicine, where there are volumes of good practice medicine, which may help us as patients when we present ourselves, but then the way in which that knowledge is used, it is already within the consciousness of doctors, it often doesn't affect their practice. And we see this particularly in management as well. And there, having been dean of a business school, of course, one's very much aware that one has a great deal of knowledge and then, rather like the cobbler, has rather badly shod children's shoes. And so this notion of the knowledge-doing gap, the accumulation of the knowledge and then how that gets translated into practice has been a very strong theme of the whole AIM programme. It's now in its 9th year, and it has produced some extraordinarily excellent work. The work was really the guiding aim of the work for AIM was to raise the level and the standard of management research, management and business research, to competitive international standards. And by all sorts of metrics, we've very clearly done that. But we also were committed and are committed to having a profound impact on this knowledge-doing gap, not only getting the knowledge through research, but its translation into practice. And we're going to have from Nick and Rick some of our finest examples of that. But we're all very well aware that this is work in progress. It's exceptionally hard, very, very challenging. And we know this from the knowledge side, and we also know this from the doing, from the practice side. So what out of the AIM research into management practice can we select as key themes which will be elaborated later on? Well, the first is that we actually need to think the whole concept of best practice. What is best practice, and how can we actually learn to do better? And for here, we need to develop models, as we have done, which show that this is a process which is not linear, which takes unexpected twists and turns, which is not a question of a perfectly formed piece of knowledge tossed into a world of ever eagerly waiting practitioners to say, thank you so much, I'll just put that into practice. Of course, you know, life is not like that. And the question is, does the knowledge arrive at a way which meets your needs? To what extent is there a meeting of minds between the knowledge and the practice? And also, how can we anticipate the unanticipated? How can we get into the twists and turns and the trial and error of practical life and enable our knowledge to be better accessible in that way? So the first theme, rethinking the very basis of best practice in this more non-linear, more organic and emergent way. Second, and starting from where the user is, not from where the knowledge generator is. Secondly, answers to the question was, where do the practices come from? Not just what they are, but how do they emerge? How are they both emerging within cultures with given values? How is it that Toyota and Cisco have very strong systems, which proves to be very, very difficult, again, to just apply? And that's because the practices that we all embody, the practices which we take into our workplace, are ones that need to sit well with our cultures, with our values, with our existing structures and processes. The third theme of actually putting practices into practice, and the importance of creating a context in which people, as is customarily said, but very difficult to put into practice, where the possibility of failure and the possibility of experimentation, where success is not always guaranteed, will be supported, because only by experimentation will you enable innovation, which is going to be the lifeblood of competitive success, actually to flourish. And then asking the fourth question, what managers and policymakers can actually do, looking at the mechanisms by which practices can be adopted, adapted, and developed. And the notion that business as usual, again, as you know, is not a normal state of life. We're having to be very, very alert to all the changes in the global economy, whether we're small or whether we're large, whether we're in a mature industry or a new startup. And the very fact that to be innovative, to be alert to new possibilities, to take advantage of the new ideas that are coming out of the research that we do, we have to firstly believe the research will be interesting and relevant. Secondly, we have to see that it actually answers our needs now. And thirdly, we have to begin to develop a common language where the knowledge and the doing are not seen as separate ends in which there is a very clear division, but which there is much more organic relationship, and that we learn indeed by doing, we learn by experimentation, we learn in collaborative networking ways. If one thinks about the way in which Procter & Gamble, for example, have dramatically changed their business model to work much more effectively up and down their supply chain in much more collaborative ways. Now, they've done that because they actually were facing very serious difficulties with their business model. But in taking account of some of the ideas about partnering and collaboration and then situating it within the Procter & Gamble context, they've managed to develop profoundly new ways of working. So I hope that gives you an introduction to the overall themes of AIM, to the work that's been done on management practice, questioning, exploring, finding more organic and emergent ways rather than formulaic, throw over the wall ways of getting real networks going between research and practice. And in that context, the alliance that we have between AIM and CMI, we see as being a very, very important conduit for enabling that to happen. So thank you very much indeed.